Thank you, everyone. This is the Scrutiny Committee. Item 1, declaration of interest. Are there any declarations?
Doesn't appear to be.
So we'll go to item 2, Fire and Rescue Quarterly Performance Report.
Okay. Is there anyone from Fire and Rescue want to say a few words on the report before we go into questions?
Good afternoon, Commissioner. Good afternoon, everyone. Brian Todd, I'm the local senior officer. If it's okay with you, I'll just give you a quick brief before we move on to the report.
Yeah.
So I'd just like to provide members with an update on a few key areas for the Perth and Kinross Angus and Dundee area, including recent management changes, the development of our local fire and rescue plans, and the relocation of our command support vehicle, and the current position with the service delivery review. I'll keep this brief and focus on the key points for your awareness. The PCAD management team restructure, following recent promotion processes, retirements and appraisal outcomes, have implemented changes within our local senior officer area management team. This restructure is designed to provide both development opportunities and long-term stability. A key change is the appointment of Group Commander Craig Wallace as Group Commander for the Dundee Local Authority area. Craig replaces Group Commander Paul Robertson and brings extensive knowledge and experience, having most recently served as Group Commander for Perth and Kinross. These adjustments ensure continued strong leadership across the area while supporting succession planning and staff development. Local fire and rescue plans. The work's underway on the development of the new local fire and rescue plans. Following discussions with colleagues in strategic planning, performance and communications, it's been agreed that consultation on these new plans will be postponed until spring 2026. This approach will allow the plans to be informed by the outcomes of the current service delivery review consultation, ensuring they are robust and aligned with the service's future direction. Formal approval of the revised timeline is awaited from our senior leadership team and the board, and further updates will be provided once confirmed. The Command Support Vehicle relocation. The Command Support Unit is a specialist vehicle deployed to larger or more complex incidents. It provides a mobile base for the Incident Command Team to plan, coordinate and monitor operations, while ensuring effective communications with Operations Control and partner agencies. The CSU, the Command Support Unit, currently based at Blackness Road in Dundee, will shortly be relocated to Forfar Community Fire Station. This move will strengthen resilience across the PCAD area and bolster resources in a strategically important location. All Forfar staff have now received the required training, and the relocation will be implemented as a 12-month trial. At the end of this period, the PCAD management team will review the impact and effectiveness of the change. Just an update on our service delivery review. The 12-week public consultation has now concluded. In total, we received more than 3,500 responses to the online consultation survey. Clearly, we recognise that some of our proposals represent a significant level of change, and I must emphasise again that no decisions have been made yet. The feedback will now be carefully considered alongside the operational evidence that informed the proposals. This process will be overseen by an independent external research organisation, the DIFLI Partnership. The next steps in the process will include independent analysis of all responses, the preparation of a consultation report summarising the findings, and recommendations made to the SFRS board. The board will meet on the 18th of December to make final decisions on the outcomes of the service delivery review. That concludes my update for today, and I hope it provides elected members with an overview of some of the key areas of work being undertaken at the moment. I'll now hand you over to Craig to deliver the quarterly report, and I'm happy to take any questions or comments at the end of the report if that's okay with yourself.
Just bear with me a minute. If Billy McPherson, are you looking to ask a question on the comments we've just heard, or are you going to report? Yeah, okay,
not
I'll
the
let you go
quarterly
there.
report, but the comments that Brian's kindly updated us on. I didn't quite catch what you're relocating from Blackness Road, but I express a little bit of concern that as one of the local elected members for where the fire station is situated, I knew nothing about anything being relocated from Blackness Road. So I was just wondering, could you indicate exactly what it is and why local elected members haven't been advised of this until, you know, what you've just said now?
Yeah, of course. The relocations for the command support vehicle. So it's a vehicle that goes out, it's a specialist vehicle, it's deployed to larger incidents, and it's a command support vehicle, so it's basically where the command team base themselves, and it provides an opportunity and a communications link between Ops Control and other partner agencies. So what we're finding is, with the activity around Blackness Road and the activity around the city of Dundee, the larger incidents tend to develop there. So what we're finding was, because our crews have already been allocated to that incident, we couldn't staff the command support vehicle, and invariably we were relying on vehicles coming from either Fife or the Aberdeen area. So what we did is, to give us more resilience, we'll relocate that to Forfar, and that'll give us a more strategic cover to come into Dundee to provide that resilience, and it'll provide a better coverage for the whole of the PCAD area, because invariably that was always out at the larger instance. So it is a 12-month trial. We'll see how that goes, but the reason it's been done is definitely to give us more resilience. In terms of informing elected members, it's business as usual for us. This would be the format for us to inform you. It's still staying within my local area. It's still within the Perth and Kinross, Angus and Dundee local senior officer area. So it is a slight tweak, but that today is the format where I would inform you of that change. I'm happy to take any further questions.
Right, okay, if I can come back on that. First of all, it might be within your area, but it's not within our area. And the point fundamentally is this: there are 8 elected members of the council on the Scrutiny Committee. Frankly, 3 out of the 4 of the local members in the area around the Blackness Road fire station are not currently on this meeting. I think one might actually be a member, but I don't think it's all. I had a quick look at who was currently taking part. Bottom line on it, Ryan, is I think it's good practice to inform all the local elected members that are affected by this. And I think it would be useful, therefore, if perhaps an email update to all elected members, particularly those in the West End ward, or to be frank, in the west of the city, really, that is served by the Blackness Road fire station specifically, was given after the meeting. Could I maybe just also mention, and it is about the messages that are sent. I know there was a bit of concern in relation to the one of the issues you were talking about in relation to, specifically, Balmossy Fire Station, and thanks very much for the timeline in relation to that following, the consultation closure on the 16th of September. There was a news report carried on the 10th of August regarding that, where an Assistant Chief Officer of the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service really, frankly, punted the cause for closing it. Location poor, low risk area, and I have some real concerns about that setting hairs flying about how real was the consultation and had the decision not already really been made. And I do really think that it's important that the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service should have, frankly, let the consultation run without trying to sort of procure the case for closure. Because, as I say, I think that caused some concern. And I know, speaking to my colleague who represents the area around Balmossy, considerable concern about, if you like, the consultation process. If you've got a chief officer of the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service really showing the case, if you like, which I think local elected members and other elected representatives would not agree with, because they feel that Balmossy is a vital resource and should be retained. So I simply make that point. I don't particularly need a response on that. I'm just making my point there. But certainly I would like your assurance that in relation to what's happening in relation to the command support vehicle, if something could go out to all elected members just advising of that, I think that would be quite helpful. Thank you, Convener.
Okay.
Yeah, more than happy to provide that after the meeting, Convener.
Thanks, then, Brian. If you want to head into your quarterly report then.
Brian. Good afternoon, convener and committee members. So the performance report of today's committee contains information relating to the 4-month period from the 1st of April to the 30th of June 2025 in support of the scrutiny of local service delivery. So during the reporting period, the SFRS attended a total of 1,047 incidents across Dundee City. Incident types involved fires were the most attended, totaling a combined 465 call-outs, which is 44% of all incidents attended. So in context, 62% of all fires were deliberate outdoor fires, and we also attended 402 false alarms and 144 non-fire emergencies, such as road traffic collisions and assisting other agencies. So you'll note by the 4-year trend charts in section 2 of the report that deliberate fires have been on an upward trend since January 2024 and non-domestic fires from July 2024. And I'll cover this in more detail in the respective sections. So firstly, looking at accidental dwelling fires, and we refer to them as ADFs, of the 28 for quarter 1, 22 were due to a cooking appliance, with damage being recorded at only one incident as having spread from the room of origin. No firefighting actions were required at 17 of the incidents, with the main actions taken by SFRS being the removal from a heat source at 4 of the incidents. 19 properties were fitted with smoke detection, 14 of which operated and gave early warning to the occupants. In quarter 1, there were 2 ADFs that resulted in 2 casualties being conveyed to hospital for slight injuries. In addition to that, 2 casualties required precautionary checks, and firefighters rescued 1 uninjured person. So our community action team have been focused on carrying out additional risk recognition training with partners to help them identify fire-related risk factors more promptly and in turn take effective prevention action. This may include supporting an occupier to find alternative cooking methods such as microwave meals rather than using a hob or grill pan. So of the 351 deliberate fires attended in the reporting period, 61 were categorised as primary fires and 290 were secondary outdoor fires. 6 of the primary fires within domestic premises and 8 within non-domestic premises, such as industrial premises, cinemas, retail premises, a church and a bar. 18 were vehicle fires, and with the remaining 29 primary fires involving grassland, woodland, crops and outdoor structures. In relation to the secondary fires, these range from tree scrub, scrubland and grassland to wheelie bins, loose refuse and refuse containers. So Camperdown Park has been identified as one of the hotspots for secondary fires, with particular concern within an area just off Liff Road. We've been working in collaboration with Dundee City Council to have the site cleared and secured, and are hopeful that this intervention will lead to a decrease in incidents in the park. Other areas of concern has been Caird Park, Templeton Woods and Clato Country Park. So to combat deliberate fires, and in particular secondary fires, we continue to engage in a multi-agency approach. Our community action team is part of an established partnership with our community wardens and Police Scotland. As part of daily work, information on secondary fires is shared between partners to provide ongoing intelligence, identify perpetrators and establish appropriate interventions, such as increased visibility through patrols. This has also included engagement with local businesses to advise on the correct storage of refuse to reduce the risk of fire setting. We have also established a strategic partnership meeting between Dundee Scottish Fire and Rescue Service Management Team and local strategic leads in Police Scotland for antisocial behaviour to review incident activity and intelligence to enable direction and support to be given to tactical and operational teams. Our community action team, along with operational crews, carry out a rolling programme of engagement within schools to educate on the dangers of deliberate fire setting and potential consequences for not only the individuals but also the wider community. Where possible, this is in partnership with our colleagues from Police Scotland, with an example being provided in section 12 of the report. Also, to give the committee some reassurance as we progress through quarter 2, we are currently delivering the Taysiders Community Safety Roadshow to all primary 7 classes in Dundee. This initiative commenced on September the 8th and will run for 3 weeks. The programme includes educational input on fire-related antisocial behaviour, derelict buildings and general fire safety. It concludes with a practical demonstration using synthetic smoke, allowing pupils to safely experience the dangers of smoke in a controlled environment. Early feedback has been positive, and we are hopeful that this preventative approach will contribute to a reduction in secondary fire incidents. I'll look to capture more information on this initiative in my next report. The SFRS also attended 16 non-domestic building fires during the reporting period, with 2 fires spreading beyond the room of origin. 8 of the incidents required no firefighting or minimal firefighting intervention, and a fire alarm system operated on 8 occasions. The only repeat attendances were at derelict industrial premises in the Coldside ward, and following a non-domestic building fire, our dedicated prevention officers conduct an audit of the relevant premises to ensure that they're complying with their statutory responsibilities and to give advice to prevent any further incidents. So SFRS attended 144 non-fire emergencies over the reporting period, which resulted in 3 fatal and 12 non-fatal casualties. Of the 3 fatal casualties, 2 were from affecting entry to a premises and assisting another agency, and 1 was from suicide. In relation to the non-fatal casualties, 4 incidents were affecting entry to a premises for another agency, and 1 incident involved a hazardous materials lorry where the driver had a slight exposure to a corrosive substance. There were 5 RTCs that accounted for 7 non-fatal casualties within the reporting period, and a further 6 RTCs resulting in no casualties. There were no fatal RTCs in Q1. So of the non-fatal casualties, there were 2 RTCs in the Coldside ward, resulting in a casualty with serious injuries and 2 casualties with slight injuries. 2 RTCs in the Maryfield ward, resulting in 3 casualties with slight injuries, and 1 RTC within the Ferry ward that resulted in a further casualty with slight injuries. A multi-agency approach is essential to reduce RTCs and associated casualties, with the Tayside Road Safety Partnership taking a collaborative approach to identify reduction priorities to influence and shape the prevention activity in Dundee, such as educational initiatives, targeted speed enforcement campaigns, and an increase in public awareness. Finally, we attended 392 false alarms during the reporting period. So false alarms can be categorised as unwanted fire alarm signals, which is an activation from an automatic fire alarm system within a non-domestic premises, and that's what's covered in section 9 of the report, or other false alarms, which covers all other types. Of the 135 UFAS calls, 1 was of good intent and 3 were of malicious intent, and 131 were due to system actuating, of which 67 of them were due to human behaviours such as cooking, burnt toast testing, accidentally or carelessly activating the alarm, and on 37 occasions due to contaminants such as dust, steam or aerosols. In relation to the other false alarm types, 83 were of good intent, such as controlled burning, cooking fumes, steam and smoke from a chimney, with 13 being malicious intent, such as activation of a call point or a phone call to the Fire and Rescue Service, and the remaining 171 were due to a variety of causes, with human behaviour or contaminants accounting for 124 of them. 60 false alarms were from self-contained sheltered housing, and 96 were from single occupancy dwellings, and 56 were from multi-occupancy flats or masonettes. So section 10 of the report gives a breakdown of home fire safety visits conducted in Q1. As of the start of this year, the SFRS are delivering a more targeted visit to high-risk individuals who meet the new eligibility criteria, incorporating wider health and social care issues. This is based around factors which we know increases someone's risk of fire. We have also reviewed and updated our visit content and are exploring ways to strengthen onward referrals and signposting to and from partner organisations, as we know from experience that individuals involved in fatal or serious fires are often known to partner organisations but not the SFRS. With regards to fire safety enforcement, our dedicated fire safety enforcement officers continue to audit relevant premises that fall within the scope of the Fire Scotland Act to ensure compliance with their statutory responsibilities. The target set for the year is 365 fire safety audits, and during Q1 a total of 66 premises that fall within the scope of the Act were audited. No patterns or trends were identified across non-domestic premises, and there was 1 prohibition notice issued in Dundee during this reporting period. And finally, section 12 of the report highlights some of the community safety engagement and partnership working initiatives that has been delivered over the reporting period. The examples are linked to the Dundee Partnership City Plan priorities where possible. Thank you, Convener.
Yeah. Is there any questions for this report? Heather?
Thank you, Convener. Sorry again for my camera. I just can't get it to work. Just about that big increase in deliberate fires. Are you Are you gathering any intelligence on whether this is a small group of people, you know, repeatedly starting fires, or are they unrelated? Or you may not be able to share that, but it was just to try and get some sense about whether there's a small group of people causing a lot of problems, or it's just a TikTok trend.
Certainly. So, I mean, obviously there's multiple areas. It tends to be north of Dundee, so kind of north of the Kingsway, that tends to be our problem areas. And obviously the four sites being Caird Park, Camperdown Park, Clato and Templeton being the area of concentration. We're obviously aware that it's going to be different youths that are involved in this, just due to the geography and the span across the area. So multiple groups, I would suggest, albeit potentially repeat offenders within the same areas, if that makes sense. And obviously some of the targeting on a daily basis with the community police and the community wardens and such like are identifying the trends on a regular basis. I touched on another meeting that we've kind of established. It actually meets next Tuesday with a chief inspector, an inspector with the antisocial behaviour portfolio, and my team at Blackness Road. And again, that's to have a deeper dive into the strategic side of things, where we can then give some further direction at that tactical and operational level. And there's obviously various initiatives that are ongoing on a regular basis to try and either diversionise from this antisocial behaviour, or again to try and obviously get that impact home to those that are involved in it through school education. Thanks.
Thanks very much. Yeah, it sounds as if you're trying to do everything you can. Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Short.
Thank you. This might be a concern for mine for a wee while. I think on Monday night there was an incident in the Maryfield ward with regards to electric bike or electric scooter, and I know, having spoken to Cami Sands in the past, that there was educational pieces that are done. Is that something that's done with Safety Siders, or is that too young a cohort?
To be honest, I know the incident's quite recent. Was it last week that we had?
Monday there.
Was it Monday? Yeah. So yeah, I would have to check and see what's kind of covered off in the syllabus for Safety Siders, but certainly charging lithium-ion batteries is covered off as part of home fire safety visits. But yeah, we've got literature on our website that we can signpost to, but I would have to double check actually what's covered off in the various initiatives that we roll out across the area.
Rachel, you looking to come in as well?
Thank you, Craig.
Yeah, if I can, thanks. Councillor Short, the police are obviously involved in Safety Siders as well, and we're given the input that relates to e-scooters, e-bikes, off-road bikes, so that's covered by the police.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Can I maybe ask a question myself in relation to the sort of increase in some of the fires in scrublands, and in particular we had the one on our own recycling centre that took up, no doubt, considerable amount of police fire resource. How does that all go into the match of Balmossy needing to be retained, given we've had other fires where, it took 20 firefighters, or it was reported in the paper to have taken 20 firefighters at Roslyn Gardens. So when it comes to making decisions around Balmossy, how are these figures going into the melting pot?
Happy to come in with that. Yeah, in terms of the recycling plant fire, that we were there 24 hours a day for seven days, so that was a significant resource. But we worked really hard and collaboratively with Dundee City Council to bring that. It was a really challenging incident for us. But we had two appliances and a high volume pump there through that time. But being a national resource, we're able to tap into the resources, not just in the PCAD area. So while we maintain resilience in all our areas, we're able to bend and flex our resource and move appliances around to make sure that we've got that resilience whilst we're still attending incidents. In terms of Balmossy and how that factors in, there's been several areas of work in terms of data taken from various levels, the Community Risk Index model, for example, and looking at projected availability of appliances and instant activity. So all that's been fed into data modelling, and that's all come out. Listen, time immemorial in the Fire and Rescue Service, we have spate conditions, we have large incidents, and it's just around that bending and flexing our response model. When if that decision's made to remove Balmossy, then that would be how we would operate. We bring appliances around from on-call areas to pump resilience on call stations, so we're maintaining resilience in other areas. But we have that ability to bend and flex our resource where the demand needs it. But yeah, that was a significant incident for us. But we worked really closely with Dundee City Council to overcome that one.
Yeah, thanks for that. I don't see any further questions. Is this report agreed? Okay, agreed. Okay, we'll move on then, Veronica.
Thank you, Convener. Item 3, Dundee Policing Area Quarterly Police Report.
Good afternoon, Convener, and thanks for the opportunity to present the Q1 report for policing. I'll shortly hand over to Rachel, who will take us through the report, but I've just got a couple of things I'd like to cover, if that's okay. Members will be aware, obviously, in relation to the ongoing investigation into the death of Dr. Gomo, which occurred in July this year. Because that's not covered in the reporting period, it obviously won't be spoken about in terms of today's updates. It remains a live ongoing investigation, but I thought it was pertinent just to highlight that to committee, since it's the first time we've met since the death of Dr. Gomo occurred. We continue to support Dr. Gomo's family. Our thoughts are obviously with her family and the wider community, and we continue to work really closely in partnership with the council and other partners to support our communities across the city. Just in terms of a national update, Convener, of course, members will also be aware of the increased activity around protests across the city in relation to anti-immigration and asylum seeker protests. I just wanted to give reassurance around the national structures that are in place in relation to Police Scotland. We have an operation name, which is Operation Lest, which oversees our whole response across the country in relation to these protests, with a national gold, a national silver, and then local bronze commanders in the local area. Superintendent Adam Smith's on, and he leads that in terms of the response across Tayside, really well supported, obviously, in Dundee by Rachel. We continue to work with the council and partners in order to facilitate lawful protest, and of course we continue to gather and glean information and intelligence to allow us to ensure we've got appropriate resource out to deal and support those that wish to come and undertake their human rights in terms of protest. Engagement and communication, will continue through Rachel into elected officials, and she'll keep you updated as we progress. Those are the kind of national updates that I just wanted to provide, Convener, and I'm really happy to hand over to Rachel, who will take us through the Q1 report in some more detail, and then of course we'll take questions at the end.
Okay. Rachel.
Thank you, Convener. Good afternoon, elected members and committee members. So if I can just refer you all to page 29 of the pack, I'll take us through the key measures in the performance on a page section and look to just provide some additional context and touch on some of the work that's going on across the city. So starting with Group 4, in terms of Group 4 offences, you'll see there is a slight increase on last year to date for the overall figure. However, antisocial behaviour is still 16.3% lower than the 5-year average. We've done some analysis work to try to establish and break down a bit more about what's behind the rise, and much of it was down to an increase in calls in the city centre, particularly in the early evenings. So as a result, we've looked at our existing shift patterns for the city centre policing team. So they have been tweaked now to ensure that there's more visibility at key times, and that is starting to see results. We're working closely, obviously, with partners in respect to the Hilltown and Lochee problem areas to solve ongoing antisocial behaviour, particularly in the multi-storey developments. And we've reintroduced Operation High Rise, which sees dedicated vertical patrols carried out within the blocks. And in both of those, we're being supported by our national teams in Operational Support Division and the Armed Response teams. So the section starting on page 39 goes into some detail on the significant prevention work being undertaken by our Partnerships, Interventions and Preventions team, working closely with partners, particularly in Dundee City Council and in the fire service, which has been touched on already by Craig, but also provides some examples of work at a more local level, including in Downfield in respect of Coldside Library and in Lochee in relation to antisocial behaviour at the Stack Retail Park. And you'll see there the continuing support we get from our Police Scotland Youth Volunteers. So the antisocial behaviour figures also incorporate fire-raising offences, and Craig's already explained much of what we're doing to jointly tackle that. Members I know are also well aware that Dundee's had a number of willful fire raisings to vehicles over the past few years, and that again is reflected in the figures. The primary reason behind the vehicle fires still remains criminal rivals linked to supply of controlled drugs and serious organised crime activity. As such, we do have complainants who are reluctant to engage with police fairly regularly, but our serious organised crime team have actually taken ownership of a number of linked fire-raising investigations, and we're hoping that will lead, or we fully expect it to lead to a large number of detections in the coming weeks. So moving on to crimes of violence, robbery figures continue to see a downward trend, down significantly on last year, with a reduction of 21.43%. Where we have seen an increase is in serious assaults, which have increased from 24 last year to 36 this year to date. A number of these offences do relate to criminal feuds, meaning again our investigations can be hindered by non-engagement from the complainer and or the witnesses. Detection rates, however, are really high and will continue to improve as investigations into more complex or protracted inquiries progress. Tackling violent crime, I can't stress enough, it's a key priority for the division, and you'll see on page 33 that as a division we've reviewed and refreshed our divisional violence strategy and reduction plan, which looks to reduce violence through a 4 Ps approach. So that's to proactively stop crime from happening in the first place, to protect victims, to safeguard individuals and protect communities, and to pursue offenders through an effective investigation and enforcement protocol, and to prepare effectively by building and sustaining effective partnerships to manage violence prevention initiatives. What I would say is that although I don't yet have the full data for Q2, we are already starting to see an improving picture as this starts to make a bigger impact, and I expect that will continue. So moving into public protection, overall Group 2 crimes, unfortunately you will see there's a big rise in overall Group 2 and rape. On the face of it, I can understand that these figures will cause concern, but if I can just take a moment, I'll provide some of the specific detail that underlies these figures. So as you can see, there has been an increase in recorded Group 2 crime of 40% on last year. That's alongside an overall detection rate improvement of 35.8% and a current detection rate sitting at 86.2%, which is extremely positive. There were 38 reports of rape recorded within Q1 in Dundee. That relates to 29 victims. Of that 38, 7 reports of rape were actually committed within the Q1 reporting period, which I believe continues to show that victims have confidence in coming forward to report what's happened, even if it's happened some time ago. 3 of the 38 reported rapes took place in public areas, demonstrating that most sexual offending takes place within the private space. There are identified suspects in every case. Again, goes to show that the and the vast majority of these cases are perpetrated by those who are known to their victims. So in respect of reports of attempted rapes in Dundee, from 1 last year to 5 this year, 2 of the 5 crimes were committed in 1963 and 1 crime was committed in 2019, but all 5 were reported to police and recorded in this current financial year. We also see an increase in prostitution offences as a result of our recent focus through Operation Begonia, which targets perpetrators who exploit vulnerable women through the purchase of sex. So that was quite a bit of detail around that, but I thought it was important to give context given the rise you can see in the data. So touching on domestic abuse, there were 483 crimes recorded, which is slightly up on last year. This continues the trend that we expect to see year on year with the introduction of new legislation such as this, as officers and partners across the criminal justice system become more familiar with applying it and deepening their understanding of instances where libelling such an offence would be appropriate, and ultimately leading to greater support for victims and an effective tool to deal with perpetrators. Moving on to acquisitive crime, really positive figures in respect of most acquisitive crime types, with reductions in housebreakings, motor vehicle crime and fraud. However, there is a big rise in the number of thefts by shoplifting. Although shoplifting offences are high, much of the increase in this quarter relates to proactive work carried out in Dundee. And by way of example, Lochie community team were aware that one premises was being repeatedly targeted, and they worked with local staff to improve prevention measures and to identify the most significant and prolific offenders. So this one premises alone accounts for 7 individuals reported for 186 shoplifting offences during this quarter. I mentioned at the last meeting that we now have a national retail crime task force. So we have successfully bid for support from that team, and retail crime plans are being put in place using a mixture of plainclothes and high visibility officers to support additional targeted patrols in these key areas. We've also carried out extensive work with retailers in respect of our top 3, which are currently the Co-op in Brook Street, the Sainsbury's in Tom Johnson Road and the Sainsbury's in Perth Road. For acquisitive crime more generally, Operation Night Watch has been introduced in Dundee, where officers effectively lock down the city in the early hours of the morning, with a view to recovering weapons, drugs, warrants, breaches of curfew, as well as building up valuable intelligence. The only other section I wanted to bring to your attention at the moment was in respect to the sections relating to drug harm and drug supply. You can read on page 31 about the excellent and ongoing partnership work across Dundee, but I just wanted to highlight the work of our serious organised crime team, who have executed 10 warrants in Dundee during the quarter, resulting in 13 individuals being reported, and the seizure of cannabis plantations, cocaine, ecstasy, as well as knives and other weapons. This is over and above the successful operations that are carried out by our Argonite and community policing teams, again detailed in the report. And finally, just moving on to road safety. So speeding offences have reduced, which may be an indication of improving driver behaviour. However, the number of drink driving offences has increased by 9 on the previous year to date. Road safety enforcement continues to be carried out as part of routine business by the road policing units, but this is now bolstered with local action plans, and priority locations have been identified which are subject to focused operational activity throughout the year, concentrating on the fatal 5. So that's dangerous careless driving, drunk driving, speeding, seatbelts and mobile phones, and that includes the A92 and the A90. So finally, I'm very pleased to report a number of successful operations to target the illegal use of e-bikes, which has seen improvements compared to previous years. It is a challenging problem, as you know, with the limited tactics we have at our disposal. However, between the beginning of March 2025 and the end of August, 41 offenders have been reported for road traffic offences relating to off-road motorbikes and e-motorbikes, 19 of which were under the age of 18 at the time of the offence. 13 of those vehicles have been seized. So I'll stop there. I hope that's been helpful, and I'm of course happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Okay, there's a few questions. I'll start with Billy McPherson.
Thanks indeed, Kevin, and thanks very much, both Nicola and Rachel, for your overviews. Can I first of all, particular thanks to Nicola for mentioning the tragic situation involving Dr. Gomo. I know it wasn't within this quarter, but I think any of us who attended the meetings organised, the public meetings organised by NAVA in the immediate aftermath of this tragic event, realise the grief felt by the whole community, including ourselves, as to what happened to Dr. Gomo, and the continuing to support of our family, I think is greatly appreciated. And whilst I'm in thanks mode, could I thank Rachel for her email to me this morning. I've not had a chance to reply to it yet, Rachel. Been a busy day. And I know you've sent out a further one to all elected members following the very concerning serious sexual assault that took place in the Pentland City Road area on Friday night. I know this doesn't cover this quarter, but I do want to mention it because I'm very grateful for the proactive way. You'll not want to discuss, obviously, the ongoing police inquiry. I understand that. But I am aware from Rachel's response and what you've put out on social media about increased police patrols, and I think that provides reassurance. My email to Rachel covered more than just the police, because there are some concerns in the community about the adequacy of the street lighting and indeed trees possibly impacting on the effectiveness of street lighting. And again, whilst I'm in thanks mode, my thanks to senior street lighting engineer who's already undertaken a check of the street lighting, and the interim head of environment has given an assurance that the trees situation, I highlighted one particular location, will be checked and appropriate action taken by forestry. I'd be grateful to be kept updated on that. Could I maybe just touch on what you said about the city centre, Rachel? I think anything that increases the visibility of the police is to be welcomed. And I'm just really wondering if your shift patterns change and the location within the city square as well will actually help ensure that. I would say, I think there's a partnership aspect to this. I've got an ongoing concern, and it goes all the way back to May, nothing to do with the police, but it goes all the way back to May. The council has not replaced the city centre ambassadors, and I keep being told no decision's been made. Well, that's 6 months. And, you know, if necessary, I'll bring that to a head by bringing it to committee. I've been in discussion with Mr. Many about that. But I think they had impact in terms of visibility, as do police officers. And I was just really wondering if the change in shift patterns, Rachel, will result in if you like, more visibility of the police. Not that I think they're invisible, because I think if you walk through the city centre, you see them. You absolutely do see them. But I'm wondering if that will help to impact further on the visibility of the police in the city centre.
Thanks, Councillor. So a couple of points then. First of all, just to let you know, Inspector McGaughey, who runs the city centre policing team, actually had a meeting earlier today with Dundee City Council just around exactly that, the city centre, and how we can improve our partnership approach. So that is ongoing, and it's a regular forum that we have to raise concerns and discuss solutions. So just to explain a bit more about the gap that we had, it actually was a gap. There were several hours where we didn't have any city centre police. Obviously, we've got the wider Dundee police who can cover during their 24/7 and able to flex and cover where needed. But there was that specific couple of hours just where we realised there was a problem, and because of the centre safe, there was a gap in the evenings, early evenings. That's now no longer there, so we have complete coverage at the times that we feel we need them most. So that, plus other measures that I know you're aware of around looking at potential location changes for the city centre team, if I can put it that way, I think we'll see improvements further as we go forward.
That's very reassuring. Could I lastly say, my ward colleague, Councillor Crichton, and I attended the Coffee with a Cop event that was held in Blackness Library recently, and I know from that the efforts that policing have made in relation to shoplifting. We've got particular issues at 2 of the supermarkets you mentioned in your update, Rachel, and I'm very grateful for the efforts and the additional hours that have been put in to try to tackle that. So, you know, as I say, most grateful for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Okay. Councillor Mills.
Thanks, Kevin. It is just in relation to the remarks made by Nicola at the start, relating to Dr. Gomo. I was just, obviously, we had the NABA meetings afterwards, and it's just to put on record my thanks to Police Scotland and Audrey May and Tony Boyle and the collaborative working that was done. I just wondered if there's been any learning from the NABA meetings and what you were hoping to do with the information that you gained through the meetings. That would be great.
Yeah.
Thanks, Convener. Yeah, I'll take that, and thanks, Councillor, for raising that. Of course, you know, as a horrendous incident, and the death of Dr. Gomo, there's always learning for us in terms of our liaison and engagement with communities. I'm supported by a partnerships team that oversees the whole of Tayside. We're then supported across the wider national Policing Together team, and the relationships that we've built up with NABA. And then our response into other seldom heard communities, and our response is really the learning that we've taken from that, councillor. And if I can be so bold, it's about us not assuming that we know the answer, and it's about us ensuring that we understand the voice of our communities, and really put ourselves in a position where we can listen, and then respond to those concerns. I know you attended those community meetings, and you know, to be in those positions where any members of your community don't feel like they're being listened to or feel like they're being treated differently is not a position any of us want to be in. So we absolutely have taken that learning. We are reviewing our whole approach across Tayside, and then how we work nationally in terms of those hard to reach communities, and ensuring that they've got a voice and that we can respond to them. So thanks for asking that question. It's really important.
Yeah, no, thank you for that, Nicola. I think the events really mattered. I think they were important that they were had. And as I say, I'm grateful for the work that you've done in the aftermath of Dr. Gomo. So, yeah, no, thank you.
Okay, Billy Wright.
Yeah, thank you. My question was on page 46, and you did highlight it. So well done, Rachel, for taking 7 of these e-bikes off the road. Because they seem to be every place, and it seems to be something that's bothering everybody. And it's usually, as you say, young people that are actually doing it. I was just wondering, is there any merit in actually, like motorbikes, making them register so that they have to pay the road tax, they have to obey by the rules of the road, and also for health and safety? You know, like say helmets and everything else. And then I've got another question about bikes.
I'll maybe take that one then, if that's okay. Ultimately, the kind of prescribed legislation of these bikes wouldn't be for us to take. You know, the government would need to take a position of that in relation to it. The challenges that you highlight, though, are real and true to us, as Rachel's described. There is, you know, a lot of these bikes are being used on roads, and therefore they're not roadworthy, they're not legal, there's no insurance, there's no protective equipment, there's no licenses. Rachel's touched on the fact that a lot of these people using them are under the age of 18, you know, so the risk that's associated with them is really significant. And then, of course, wrapped into that, our approach and our policing approach as to how we try and deal with that is a challenge. So Rachel's got a kind of local response to that, and I'll let her speak to that. But yeah, the kind of overarching legal position, if you like, would need to be something that's put in place across the government in order for us to then police accordingly.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Rachel, you want to make that additional comment?
If I can, yeah, so a lot of the success has been around or on the back of targeted operations where we work in partnership with road policing colleagues. The tactics we can use are difficult as and when we just happen to see a bike, but if we can be a lot more joined up around it. So we've now got the drone available to us in the city, so use of the drone to follow anyone committing criminality allows us to see where it's heading to. We've obviously got people with face coverings, so intelligence is key, and I suppose it's an appeal to just feed in intelligence and to encourage the members of the community to feed in with more intelligence. That all helps. We're looking at a couple more targeted operations this month and next. So hopefully we'll see more success, but it is a difficult one, but hopefully we can get smarter with our tactics, probably is the best way of putting it. And use of new technologies as well. So like the drone and potentially improvements with, we're trying to get new cameras, for example, just to be able to get high quality footage that we can assess later.
Yeah, I must admit, I had a bit of a fright myself going along Clippington Road the other day, where there was one, and he had a mask, a face mask on, all in black, and he was continually jigging in and out the cars and probably upsetting quite a few of the drivers. But if I could ask about questions about bicycles as well, because there seems to be a lot of bicycles using the pavements. And I actually witnessed an old lady coming out her house, and she actually, this bike was going really, really fast, and she come out her house and didn't see the bike. But I mean, he just about knocked her over, and that seems to be a regular thing in the Forfar Road, where all the, well, a lot of the bicycle users are actually on the pavements.
Yeah, and again, illegal. You know, you're not supposed to be on a pavement with a bike. So again, I think that probably comes down to the sort of prevention side and trying to educate our young people more, but clearly it is an offence. So again, intelligence, reporting to the police so that we can pick it up and try and deal with it retrospectively if we can. And that coupled with the prevention side of trying to explain the dangers and the difficulties that it causes for the community, trying to get our young people to become good, responsible citizens is all ongoing. So thank you.
Okay, thanks, Rachel.
I'll maybe make a comment before I bring Heather in, because I was going to raise e-bikes myself. I was in the town just waiting on the bus the other night where there was somebody going about, would suggest it wasn't exactly a child, you know, potentially the 30-year-old or thereabout, you know, driving around on an e-bike, very powerful looking e-bike on the pavement, going past buildings where if someone came along at the side of that, you know, they'd absolutely no chance to just step out in front of them and be hurt really badly. And, you know, I suppose even for the rider of that bike in the centre of the town, there's a lot of street furniture that you know, if they lost control of it in any way, the chances are they hit either a person or they hit something else. So I think it kind of, I would like to see it as a bit of a focus for police to address the issues, because it's happening in every housing estate, and I really don't want an elderly person hit where it's sort of, it's damage to their hip and their mobility is gubbed for the rest of their days, you know?
Yeah, thanks, convener. I can give that assurance that it absolutely is a focus, particularly I would say for the community policing teams in the north and the city centre team. So we have meetings scheduled for the community sergeants for both those area and the city centre inspector around how they can work more closely together, because the people on the bikes in the city centre are not living in the city centre. So it's just trying to get us all joined up, but it is a key focus for us. We recognise the dangers involved in it. It's a tricky one because we are limited in terms of having to protect the rider as well. So, you know, much as there might be a desire to take more aggressive action, we have to balance it with the safety of the rider, particularly when they're not wearing helmets. So it does make things a bit trickier than you would like, but we are fully focused on it.
Okay, I appreciate that. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you. Rachel, I feel like I'm in touch with your team every single day. I've got no idea between the anti-immigration riots, NABA and the Hill Toon, I've no idea when any of you sleep. So the first thing was I really wanted to thank you for Operation High Rise. I think the whole thing, I'm getting responses because your officers are going and speaking directly to people, and it is making a difference, because part of what we're overcoming is that sort of feeling that there's no sense in reporting anything because nothing will happen.
Yeah.
So I think you've got these 9 warrants that were undertaken. So it's whether there's any thinking in, I'm sure there is, but you know, what you're thinking in the police about how you better communicate the fact that people, it's worth people continually calling 101 because it builds the case. That's what I'm telling people all the time. Please phone every single time there's an incident because it builds the case. But some way of you communicating that you are getting results as a result of that cooperation. So that media engagement. And then I think the other thing was we spoke at the NAB events about a possible knife amnesty. I know Councillor Mills has done a lot on this in the Blade Angel, and I don't know whether you could update on that. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Anderson. So we do try to put out media releases on the back of any successful targeted operation to tackle drug dealing. We obviously go out with the leaflets around premises that we think we're trying to develop intelligence around, but I'll take that away because I'm pretty sure there's more we could do to publicise it. And as you say, the proof of the pudding comes from actually seeing the effective action. So if we can be more visible with our social media account, particularly around that, then that's something I would look to try and do. So thanks for raising that with me. The knife amnesty, I think, Chief Super, are you looking to come in on that?
Yeah, sorry. Thanks for that, Councillor, and thanks, Rachel. So again, I mentioned my partnership teams. So they're engaged in engagement with our national team around our approaches in terms of prevention and knife prevention and education. We do a lot locally in terms of No Knives, Better Lives, the engagement that Rachel has with the community teams and the links into the school. So all of that work will continue. And the Knife Angel was in Perth sort of in November last year. So again, we're looking at the opportunities to see what learning we've had from there to bring that into Dundee and again across the wider footprint of Tayside. A knife amnesty has to be led by the Scottish Government. So again, the conversations that we're having internally are around, you know, how we can ask for that or indeed our requests and to see how we would support it. So those conversations are ongoing, Councillor, and Rachel will keep all elected officials updated in relation to that. But please be reassured, knife crime obviously is a key priority for us under our violence strategy, and that education and awareness piece that we're undertaking, not just through schools, but with all engagements that we have.
Okay.
Thank you.
Cheers. Councillor Black.
Thanks, convener. We have residents still in the sheltered housing in Ardler who are suffering from the e-bikes and the petrol-driven bikes as well. So I applaud your efforts in reducing the numbers and taking some of them off the street. But it's an ongoing problem, and I'm sure you know that. I appreciate what you're doing, and any reassurance you can give the residents in that sheltered housing complex would be helpful.
Thanks, Councillor. I actually know the community policing team engaged with the sheltered housing complex. It was either yesterday or the day before, so I got some feedback on that because we are aware of that being a particular area of concern. They've given us some really useful information on the back of that visit, so we're taking that forward, and there's additional reassurance patrols and prevention targeted patrols to try and catch people in the act is probably the better way of putting it. That tends to be more the younger people and antisocial behaviour rather than some of these really big bikes, but it's obviously causing a real issue around noise and disruption and causing alarm for the residents. So we're fully sighted on that and keeping regular engagement with them.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Billy Scott.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back as well to Operation Challenge and just have it confirmed that it also includes e-scooters and not just e-bikes, because while I see a lot of e-bikes, I see far more e-scooters, and I know they're very popular with young people who do tend to use them responsibly. I see a lot of adults using them as well, and quite often on the pavements in Brodie Ferry, where the speed limit is 20 miles an hour on the road, some of these adults are using e-scooters going faster than that along the pavement. So I just wanted to check that e-scooters is part of Operation Challenge as well.
Thanks, Councillor Scott. Yes, I can confirm it. It's the legal use of bikes and scooters in all its forms and across. It's actually a Tayside-wide initiative rather than just a Dundee initiative, but led by Dundee. So, yeah, well aware of that, and obviously of the issues in Broughty Ferry, which Sergeant Forbes oversees with her community policing team. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Short.
Hi, it's just with regards to the fact that this, I think, is the last time that you'll come to the actual Scrutiny Committee. I can't remember what the full name now is of the Scrutiny Committee. Kevin, you can keep me right on that because it's your committee. Can you confirm when you're coming back into the new committee? Will it be the 6 monthly period, or are you still looking at quarterly?
Convener, I would just probably ask that that's something that I speak with the team about off committee. We'll need to have a little look at the meeting dates, when they align, when we've got the data. And I see the Chief Exec's got his hand up, but I would probably ask that I just get an opportunity to go and have a look at that, please.
Okay. Lynn, I'm not sure of the name of the new committee. I'll just wait on the papers coming out and I'll get it then. I think it's Scrutiny and Audit Committee or something like that. So,
yeah. Is Greg wanting to come in by the looks of it,
Greg.
Kevin?
Yeah, thanks, convener. So the standing orders delegated authority were approved on Monday night, but just to give members assurance, there were discussions in the run-up with the Chief Superintendent, Nicola Russell and Brian Todd about that change. So we're just in the process of communicating. The committee agreed that on Monday night, and then we'll confirm the dates of when police and fire will be coming to the new committee within the main cycle. So if you can leave that with us, convener, we'll confirm that in a matter of a few weeks.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks for that. I'd been at COSLA events with police, and they had discussed the 6 monthly, so I've obviously got it mixed up in my head, so apologies if I'm running ahead.
Okay, thanks for that. Anyway, well, there is no further questions. Is this report agreed? Okay then, it's agreed. Let's move on then, Veronica.
So we now move on to item 4. Please note that this has a minor typo in the heading, and it should read Dundee City Council 2024-25 Accounts and Audit.
Okay.
So the first report is External Auditors Report to Members of Dundee City Council and the Control of Audit for the year to 31st of March 2025.
Okay. I think the first item's Audit Scotland. Is Audit Scotland looking to make a comment?
Yes, please, convener. Yeah. If I could just check a couple of matters with the committee directly and give an introduction to the reports. I'm conscious I've got Dundee City Council's annual audit report and the Charitable Trust's annual report as well. So I don't know if you want me to take them all in a winner or pause after I introduce the council reports and then do the Charitable Trust separately.
We'll maybe just do the Charitable Trust separately, and we'll go through them sort of A to F, I think it is, or further.
Thanks, convener.
Just before you start, at the last committee, when there was a Rachel come up asking a question, it was one of the policewomen, and I actually thought it was yourself. I thought, great, Audit Scotland's a way to get tore into that. But
I'm expanding my powers into the police. Thanks, convener. The first external audit papers that are in front of you, the first is a covering letter to my annual audit report, which summarises the status of the audit, which is concluded bar the signing later today of the annual accounts of Dundee City Council, and it sets out the wording of my proposed audit opinion at Appendix A of that first paper, and the requested representations from your Section 95 officer, Mr. Thompson, who will sign those representations alongside the accounts after this meeting. And just to say, the proposed opinion is unqualified. There's no modifications to it. It's a clean audit opinion for the council. And I've said before and will say again to you, while you can expect that in terms of your financial management, it's not to be taken for granted, and is an endorsement of your stewardship of public funds as the council. So that's good positive assurance to you as members of the Scrutiny Committee in that regard. I also report to you any uncorrected misstatements that I identify above my reporting threshold, and to say that management have corrected all the misstatements we've identified. So there's nothing uncorrected to report to you as the Scrutiny Committee. We identified reportable errors of £8.5 million, and adjustments have been made as reported in the annual audit report. I will ask you specifically, and you can either take that now, convener, or at the end before questions, if there are any matters related to fraud, actual or suspected fraud, or material non-compliance with laws and regulations that you're aware of that have not already been brought to my attention. So if there's anything major and new that has come to your attention that has not been already notified to me, now is your opportunity to raise that, because I would need to take that into account.
There isn't for me, and you obviously will pause and see if there's any going to come from the rest of the committee, because obviously their role's audit as well. So it doesn't appear that there's anything going in the chat, so nothing to report.
That's good. Thank you very much for confirming that. I'll run on to the substantive paper, which is the annual audit report, which reports all the findings of my 24-25 audit of Dundee City Council's annual accounts. And because you are a public sector organisation, the Code of Audit Practice requires us to report on wider scope areas of financial management, financial sustainability, vision, leadership and governance, and your use of resources to improve outcomes for the people of your area. And we also are required to provide a conclusion on your arrangements to secure best value. So a large proportion of our audit is the audit of the annual accounts, which include your financial statements. And as I've said, I am proposing a clean audit opinion on those, and we comment on our audit in the first section of that report, to say that we have addressed the areas of significant risk that we brought to the Scrutiny Committee at the start of the year in our annual audit plan. We also report the level of materiality that I have used to determine whether the misstatements we identify would affect somebody's economic decision making on the basis of those financial statements. And these matters are brought out in exhibits in the report. The materiality levels, our annual audit plan sets them out based on the prior year financial statements values, and we update them when we receive the current year's financial statements. So the change is reported to you there. So it's £18.1 million is my materiality threshold for the council, and £18.3 million for the group accounts, which are included within those financial statements. You'll note in Exhibit 2 of the report that we set out the misstatements and significant matters for your attention, and concluded what's been amended in the audited financial statements. There's some changes there between what you've seen as the unaudited annual accounts and the audited version that will be signed today. We've also most of those findings are to do with non-current assets or fixed assets. That's a common area for us to identify misstatements, and because of the numbers involved, it's quite a common area for us to identify material or significant numbers that have changed in the accounts. We make a couple of recommendations for improvement, which are reflected in the Appendix 1 of my report. But as we run through the annual accounts section, I'm not raising significant concerns with the quality of your annual accounts. We're recommending that the council reviews it and streamlines it, because it's a very long set of annual accounts. It contains good information, but it is very long, and there's scope to streamline it. Exhibit 5 shows how we said we would address the significant risks material misstatement in your accounts, and sets out the outcome of that audit work there. And we conclude on your implementation of prior year recommendations as well in that. I will say, I confirm in my annual audit report that I and the team remain independent of the council in terms of our role as your external auditor. Our independence is very important, and we keep that in mind throughout the audit year. So there's nothing to report in that regard. If we move on to wider scope areas, we conclude that your financial management and budget setting arrangements are effective, and report on the financial position for the year. But I do note that effective financial management is not enough to bridge the significant gap that you have in your budget. In your budget setting, those arrangements set out for council members on a regular basis. There is a budget gap in future years that you will have to bridge, and we set out some of those areas where the council's looking to address that. But we do flag for you, and indeed across the public sector, that's a huge challenge for you to be looking to bridge those gaps, and looking for the longer term projections the gap is increasing in those longer term projections. So the way the council reviews its services, transforms itself, works with partners to transform public services will be particularly important. We've already concluded in prior years, and I maintain that conclusion, that the council has a clear vision and strong leadership to deliver it. But we don't underestimate the task that is ahead of you and others to deliver that. The best value thematic work that was carried out and reported to you earlier this year was on service transformation. So you and others have shared information with us on how the council is planning and delivering service transformation. We do summarise rather the best value findings in the annual audit report that covers all of our audit work for the year. So you'll see some familiar conclusions in this report from the earlier best value thematic report. We also reflect on your performance as reported through the local government benchmarking framework. I'm aware you've also got a progress update on the council plan on today's agenda as well. So we do take account of the wider performance reporting, including statutory performance indicators, when concluding on your use of resources to improve outcomes, and note that that is a generally positive picture, but we do notice the pressures on the council, which are reflected over time. And we conclude that your arrangements to secure best value are effective, but also reflect on the need for transformation, the need to maintain reporting to the public and to elected members on that transformation. And the last part of that annual audit report for Dundee City Council is the action plan, which has been agreed with management, and timescales and responsible officers have been set out. And the second part of that appendix shows progress on prior year recommendations, including prior year best value recommendations. And we have a list of national reports which may be of interest to members that were published during the 24-25 year as the last section of that report. So that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour of the annual audit report. I'm very happy to take questions on the annual audit report itself or the audit of the council from members just now, and then I'll move on to the trusts after that, if I could.
Yeah, thanks. I know it's Billy McPherson's got a question.
Thanks, Convener. My question is not to Rachel. It's in relation to the actual annual accounts at 4C1. I don't know how I am assuming someone from corporate services will want to give an overview of the actual accounts. So maybe I should be quiet until we reach that. Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Black, for questions for Rachel.
Yes, I've got a couple of questions. Well, first of all, a comment very briefly. I agree that the very long note to the council's accounts, I think, is overdone. I think a lot of that information is available in other places too. And I think it would be good to have it shortened, because by the time you've read that note, you've no energy left to read the accounts. Minor point, well, maybe not so minor, the asset value of the Tayside Valuation Joint Board and also of the Health and Social Care Partnership seemed to kind of pop in and out of the accounts because they fell below the de minimis level and then came back up again and maybe went back down again, I can't remember. And it just seems odd that those two bodies should not just automatically be in the accounts, never mind what the amount of money involved is, the amount of value is. So that's one thing. And the other question I have, and I'm happy to get my answer whenever it's available, and it might be that you can't do it all just now, is you highlighted that when we transferred over to ResourceLink to the cloud, that we didn't spend enough time making sure that it all worked, but also all the staff who were involved in that transfer were no longer employed by the council when you sought to ask them questions. So just interested to know a little bit more about that and how much of a concern would that be?
Yeah, Rachel.
Thanks, Councillor. I'll take the group accounts question first, and then I'll maybe bring in my colleague Mark Johnson to speak about the detail of ResourceLink shortly. So in terms of group accounts, the council has set a de minimis level for that base level for consolidating the other entities in which it has an interest, which is perfectly acceptable for group accounts. The Health and Social Care Partnership, in terms of the council's funding to the partnership, to the IJB, and what is essentially a commissioning grant back to the council as a service provider from the IJB, that's in Dundee City Council's financial statement. So that substantial amount is already in income and expenditure in the comprehensive income and expenditure statement. The bit for group accounts is your share of the IJB reserves, which is much smaller, and given the position of IJBs is getting smaller and projected to reduce further. So that's a much smaller element, which is why the de minimis level is relevant for that. So the substantive amount of transactions with the IGB are in there. It's just that reserves element that was in and out. In terms of Tayside Valuation Joint Board, again, it fell below a de minimis level, and I've accepted that level as reasonable for in terms of materiality for group accounts to exclude that. And there was a matter to do with pension liability and or pension asset and asset ceiling. So it was a technical accounting entry that changed. So there was a very unusual figure in the Tayside Valuation Joint Board and audited accounts, which has since been corrected. And I understand that's to do with an asset ceiling, although I will pause in case Mark wishes to correct me on that one. But my understanding was there was an audit adjustment within the joint board accounts when somebody questioned why something had changed so significantly. So that then falls back below the de minimis level. So from my perspective as your auditor, I'm content that Dundee City Council's group accounts are accurate and that the application of that de minimis level is appropriate. But there was some in and out to do with the entries that went through. So I don't know if that is enough on that particular matter.
Yes, that explains it all. Thank you.
Okay. Mark coming in to answer the cloud question for you.
Yeah, I'll also maybe just quickly on that last point about the valuation board. We haven't obviously started. We're currently in the middle of undertaking the audit of the valuation board. So for now, and what you'd have seen in the draft accounts of the valuation board, that entry was in there. That will be changed as part of our kind of audit process for the valuation board for that there. In terms of the ResourceLink, so yeah, we had found that had been transferred across to the cloud, but we really had no assurances around about whether or not how that data migration had taken place and whether it had taken place successfully. There was no evidence that we were able to obtain for that there. So as we've sort of set out in paragraphs 39 and 40 of our report, I think they're on page 40 of the pack there, we did some work around about looking at the accuracy of payroll data. So that was looking at the council's overall controls in terms of how that works there. We did some of our own testing of staff existence just to confirm that a sample of staff did in fact exist and they were found on the payroll system, and also some other substantive testing that we did of payroll totals kind of confirmed that the overall payroll was correct. So we were satisfied that what had happened, that the data transfer had been successful and had taken place correctly. So there's no issues over that there. The issue was more just that we didn't have the evidence at the time directly from the council, and we had to obtain that ourselves.
Can I just ask, convener, are you
Yeah,
happy
sure.
that the next time we do a transfer of systems to the cloud, and I'm sure there'll be many more, that you won't be faced with that lack of evidence in the future?
So if I can answer that one, Councillor, I'm sure Mr. Thompson want to come in. Do you want to come in first, Paul?
Yeah. Paul?
No, happy for you to add anything that you wish to first, Rachel.
I was going to say, from discussions with management, I am confident that that's been taken on board for the future and part of clearance discussions and discussion of actions from management going forward. I'm fairly confident. I'm hoping Mr. Thompson will now confirm that. Thanks.
No, thanks very much, Rachel. I'm very much reassured by the findings of the audits in terms of that supplementary testing, that the transfer was done accurately. In terms of moving forward, as set out within the action plan, we recognise that the responsibility to ensure that data sits on behalf of those external partners in terms of what they're contractually obliged to do, and we'll continue to gain assurances through our contract management practices. So I'm confident from both respects that moving forward that will not be a risk, or it will be managed appropriately.
So thanks, Audit Scotland, for that very comprehensive answer. And Paul, it sounds as though we've got very good assurances there. Thank you.
Councillor Short.
Thank you, convener. Changing for the future is something that has been the council's strapline for the last 15 years. I've just done a wee check on Copilot and found out that's exactly when it was. And we've had over 100 projects that have helped us to change for the future. Within your report, Rachel, you have said that we could maybe be a little bit better speaking to elected members and members of the public about the progress that we're making with that journey, and I'm working on the assumption that you don't just work in Dundee City Council, you're working over a wider area. And is there something that you can suggest that would allow us to basically tell that good news story with regards to it, because it's something that you've picked up as being missed within the delivery of what we do, actually communicating the good work to the wider public and us as elected members?
Thanks. So the best value work we've reported this year, that finding was largely related to the focus of the work this year was on the council's, I'm going to say, 6th phase of transformation. It's around building a better council. So I'm scrolling through my reports to find the right section here. So a lot of that is internal. Previous phases have been external facing. I know there's still external facing work carrying on with partners and so on, but the focus was largely around building a better council. And some of that, because it's sitting within the council plan, is not so easy to draw out. And you may find as a council, you don't think it should be drawn out more directly in terms of reporting on what the transformation activity is, what it's delivering, how it's progressing. So it was about teasing out some of that to make that more publicly available for those who may be interested. So my view is that the council tends to know its community and its stakeholders better. You know, we've commented on your engagement with communities previously. So from my perspective, it would be most appropriate for you to decide how best to share that information. We just noticed in terms of the latest phase, largely because it's been mainstreamed, for want of a better term, into council planning and change. It wasn't being reported separately, because in previous phases it's been, here is transformation, here is our public reporting on transformation as a thing, whereas now it's more mainstreamed and this is business as usual for Dundee. As you say, that's been changing for a number of years and will continue to change and evolve going into the future in that respect. So it wasn't something fundamental about the way you engage. It was drawing out that those who may have followed the previous phases of transformation may want to know more information about what's happening in terms of council transformation, because people like myself are reporting publicly that all public services need to reform and transform and work with each other to change the way public services are designed and delivered. I'm not sure that does answer your question, but that's where we're coming from in terms of that recommendation and our view of Dundee City Council's reporting of that latest phase.
Okay, thank you. I'm not sure it did, but it's the basis that you work to.
Yes, there will be a national thematic report about transformation across all 32 councils and drawing out areas of good practice and things that have worked in some parts of Scotland that may be of use to other councils more widely across Scotland, and drawing out some of the good practice and case studies in that regard. But we've noticed that difference, just in reporting in terms of each phase of the council's transformation. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you. It's just sometimes I go to events and awards and things, and I see awards being put forward, and I think, well, we do that, and we've done that for about the last 10 years. So I think it is that thing that we're maybe a little bit reticent about blowing our own trumpet. Thank you.
Rachel, I was going to ask this because it's the first time I've seen anything reflecting in your report around the equal pay claim. And, given that it's, obviously note that it's went on for 2021, is it something that's been on Audit Scotland's radar? Probably when I get to the accounts, I'll be able to ask in more detail what the officers are thinking about that, given that that might well reflect the amount of savings or otherwise that we need to make come setting the next budget.
Thanks, Convener. And yes, equal pay is a matter that remains on our radar and has done for many years, depending on the council and the stage equal pay claims have been at. So this year, we note in terms of the timing and the process for equal pay, there's a requirement for all the trade unions to provide set information to the council to allow the council to then consider its response and move that process along. So from an accounting perspective, I'm interested in, has the process moved far enough along that a potential liability could be quantified, or is it an unquantified contingent liability? And for the 24-25 accounts, I've concluded that disclosure of an unquantified contingent liability is appropriate. So it's looking at how is that process managed. Well, the looking at how the process was managed has been in and out of various audit reports, I don't think particularly for Dundee's, for a number of years. But now my focus is on where the process has got to in terms of potentially quantifying that matter. And I know that's very current and live just now in terms of getting information in from the trade unions. I'm sure officers would be able to provide more information. But from my perspective, it's looking at, for your financial statements as at the 31st of March 2025, do you have appropriate disclosure and do the circumstances and the information that you hold support that position? And I'm content that disclosure is appropriate and it's in the accounts as a contingent liability.
Okay, thanks very much for that. I don't see any further reports. Obviously, thanks for the somewhat clean bill of health. They say the officers are quite happy with that, as we are. I don't want to see things going adrift when we're here to run such a tight ship and we budget constraints as they are. So I don't see any questions. This report agreed and noted. Okay, thank you. Veronica? Move on to the next, 4B. Is there an officer want to make a comment on that?
Happy just to briefly say this report sets out the formal response to the auditor's report that Rachel's just outlined, including those actions that have been agreed. So happy to take any questions.
Seems no questions for you, Paul. Was the report agreed? Okay, so we'll move on to 4C then, which is the accounts. Are you leading on that as well, Paul? I know that a lot of it attended a briefing, but you may well want to say a bit more.
Yeah, I mean, again, very briefly. So Rachel's highlighted within the report to members in terms of the process and following the audit process, any adjustments that have resulted in that have been reflected in the audited accounts, and you hear before yourself today. And as you say, we've undertaken a briefing for all elected members last week, highlighting the key points and any figures within the accounts, but certainly happy to take any questions today.
Okay. Billy McPherson.
Thanks indeed. Thanks, Paul. And briefing useful as is always the case. I would like to place on record my thanks for the hard work the officers put in to get there. I know there's been some talk about the length of it, and item 4, I think, has 310 pages. I'm not a particular fan of dumbing down or cutting out. If it reduces the amount of, and with the caveat that if it reduces the amount of information and explanation, but if there's a way of slimming it down without reducing the amount of information and explanation, which is very useful, then so be it. If I could maybe, just before I come on to my substantive question, just mention Councillor Short's investigation as to the history of Changing for the Future wasn't quite lengthy enough, because it actually goes back to 2007. And you, Kevin, and I will recall, I'm sure, a meeting of the then administration immediately after the 2007 election, when the then Chief Executive proudly showed us the new strapline, Changing for the Future. And I remember saying at the time, I thought it was awful, corporate, meaningless nonsense, and could we change it? And he said, oh, but we've had the letterheads printed already, because that was in the days when we actually had letterheads and letters went out the door. So all I would say about it is, it's maybe had its day. I would say it's now tired, awful, corporate, meaningless nonsense. But that's only my opinion. Others may think otherwise. But I would just simply make the point that after 18 years of having the same strapline, maybe now is the time to look at something afresh. But I just leave that thought with officers. My question more substantially is about page 71 of the report. And it's about the areas of increase and decrease to the general fund and deficit on the HRA and so on. And what struck me about it was that we see the same really levels of overspend that if you picked up, in fact, I know it said 23-24 at the start in error, but if you'd picked up 23-24, the real one, you'd have seen pretty much the same areas around, for example, unplanned safety repairs, property costs, energy costs. I understand energy costs is a hard one to judge. I get that. But I'm just really wondering what the council does. And going back to the points I've made at the last two city governance committees about the projected overspend just a matter of weeks into the new financial year. Do we have anything in the way of sort of zero-based budgeting? In other words, we put the current budget in the bin and we say, what did we actually spend last year and what do we actually need? Because I think I've seen an overspend on property costs every year for quite a number of years. And I'm just really wondering if a zero-based approach is maybe the way forward in relation to trying to tackle the fact that we have these overspends year on year, if you like.
Okay. Paul?
Yeah, thanks, convener, and thanks, Billy McPherson. So a couple of points. Firstly, just to thank you for your thanks to the staff in terms of preparation of the accounts, and I'll certainly pass that on. In relation to your point, we don't have a full zero-based approach. I would describe what we have as a more of an incremental approach to budgeting, but certainly there's elements within that we will adopt a more incremental approach in terms of certain areas, for example, where we've got specific challenges. And if I reflect most recently on areas such as fleet, where we've actually pared that down and started with a zero-based approach to identify exactly what the cost of these services are and what we require moving forward. And I would be supportive of that for the areas where there are a significant risk. I would add that to undertake a full zero-based approach for all areas of the budget each year would be a significant undertaking. So it's probably something that we will work towards on a more phased basis. But I do accept your point in terms of some of the recurring items that you may pick up within the narrative within the accounts, and notwithstanding demand pressures and the volatility of demand each year, there may be some areas in there that do come up each year. So we're certainly happy to look at that as part of the budget process next year and ensure that we have as closely a realigned budget as possible. And therefore, when we're coming back as part of the regular established monitoring process, we're only picking up any key items, and indeed at the year end as well. Hopefully that will reduce any ups and downs as it will.
Thanks very much for that, Paul. That's a very reasonable reply. I think a targeted approach. I appreciate the resource implications of ripping it all up and starting again. So I think the targeted approach, as you alluded to, is sensible. So I'm grateful for your response. Thank you.
Okay, Bailey Scott.
I wanted to ask about the remuneration bands and reporting for that, which has gone up with staff earning over 50,000 has gone up to 863, an increase of 190. And I wondered if that is just due to the annual pay increase, which would automatically bring people into the 50,000 band, or is there more to it than that? Is there some new posts being created, or have some staff been significantly regraded because there's been non-filling of posts? So staff to cover the responsibilities that need to be covered, have they been regraded, which has seen a significant jump in their salary? Because in some of the figures, for instance, the banding of 80,000, 84,999 has gone up by 24 posts, but the two bands below that have only reduced by 1 and by 4. So it seems to me that there's been some quite significant jumps there. I just wonder what the explanation is for that, please.
Thank you, Bailey Scott, for the question. So I can confirm that the result of the movements is a direct result of any pay awards and incremental progression that's already within post established.
You seem to have broke up there, Paul.
Convener, if I can just step in at this point, and I think
sure.
Mr. Thompson's having connectivity. So thanks, Bailey Scott. The salary increase are predominantly around all of the national pay and grading structures, and that's including what we would describe as LGE staff, but also staff who are working in education and when their pay rises are being applied. Should there be any regrading of posts which are reviewed by all the senior management team, these would follow the usual establishment change note process, where I understand it goes out to trade unions and elected members for 1 week's consultation. But please be assured that predominantly all of the increases are as a result of the national pay and grading increases, or indeed people who are naturally progressing through the pay and grading structure, which has been agreed nationally.
Thank you.
Okay. I would have liked to ask a question around the equal pay claim and the contingent liabilities that are there. I suppose in the equal pay claim, looking to see if we believe that we're closer to coming up with whatever a figure may be in a negotiated settlement based on potentially next year's February and setting a budget so as that anything could be built in at that time. And when I went in and looked at the contingent liabilities, it would suggest that the historic abuse cases are a sort of 10-year programme of, I think, is it money taken from council's budget before it lands on our doorstep, and where we are in that 10-year, where are we in that 10-year process, if I'm right? And what's the value?
So, Convener, if I can I just check, is Mr. Thompson back on the call and has he heard the question from yourself? So, Paul, are you back with us? So I'm not sure he is.
No.
Paul? So, Convener, if I can potentially pass the first question to ask Mr. Menny to give an overview of equal pay, And if Mr Thompson comes back up, hopefully he could pick up the question around the value. And Mr Many may want to say something about the historic child abuse, or we may need to come back to members of scrutiny on that one as well.
Okay.
Thank you, Convener. As regards the equal pay claims, as has been indicated earlier on, these have been progressing for a number of years now, though I think group leaders will remember we're still within the time window that I indicated was likely at the time that I first briefed members back in 2021. As I think elected members also know, I've explained that I see this as being a two-stage process. First of all, there's a question whether the council is liable, and if the council is liable, what the extent that liability is. At the moment, we still await information from the trade unions that will enable me to make a judgment on those matters, but I would reassure elected members, as I have done in the past, that I will ensure that they are all properly briefed on my view once we have that information in order to make a judgment. With regard to the second question, Convener, regarding the funding of any abuse compensation that may be payable, I wouldn't be the best person to answer that question. So if Mr Thompson has not rejoined the call, can I suggest we respond to elected members separately on that?
Happy enough with that. Let's Paul's back on with the answer. Paul?
Yeah, thank you, Bailey Keenan. Apologies, not a very good time for my signal to break off. So if I understood part of the question in relation to the child abuse cases, there is an arrangement in place where the Scottish Government have effectively top sliced the overall settlement that will enable them to deal directly with any claims that are lodged rather than them being placed direct to the local authorities in terms of where any alleged offences have been alleged, rather. I don't have any overall figures, I'm afraid, in terms of the status of those claims, but certainly happy to pick that up and share it with all members of the committee in due course.
Sorry, Paul, within it, I thought it seemed to suggest that there was a 10-year period where that would happen. And so the question was really, what is the value that's top sliced? And where we are in relation to the 10-year? Are we year 9? Are we a year 2? Perhaps it's something you need to come back.
Yeah, it's a fairly small percentage. I think it's a value overall of the settlement, so it will be a different percentage for different authorities. But happy to pick up that and where we are in terms of the 10-year cycle and come back to you.
So take it that the quantum could grow every time there is something settled.
Potentially.
Yeah. Okay. Can I just make a similar comment to Bailey McPherson in relation to liking the detail that's in reports, and in particular this one, and the sort of budget volume that we receive nearer the time. In opposition in setting an alternative budget, these are sort of documents that we would use on a regular, and whilst slimming them down in some way might be useful for a staffing point of view when it comes to making a judgment call for ourselves. And I'd be calling potentially for more information than we receive, given that last year's budget consultation approved by the administration put out to public consultation UNESCO and Douglas Sports Centre. And Douglas Sports Centre appears to be one of the best used sports facilities we've got. And if we'd have taken that as a saving at that time without having the now detail that sits in the ECOS report, the burden would have been flung out with the bathwater. So I'm not sure that we should be putting out to public consultation things that are potentially something that's a bit of an earner for council. So I just flagged that up. The ECOS report certainly highlights how much it costs for an individual and how much of a subsidy we have to make for them to go through the door of our premises, and obviously sets a number of other targets that we could work on by way of increasing patronage of these facilities. I notice the Chief Exec's looking to come in.
Thanks, Convener. Just to give you the reassurance, the comment by Audit Scotland was around the options available to the Council to consider whether or not the detail that's in the audit accounts are included, or whether there's a link potentially to that information. But as per the report that Mr Thompson has submitted, we will consider those points. And in relation to further budget consultations, officers hope to bring back a report in the coming weeks and months ahead, where committee will decide on what options officers go out to consult on. So hopefully that's helpful and provides you with a degree of assurance.
Yeah, certainly does. But it's not well. You're putting your marker down in that bit of paper. I'm putting mine down verbally. Okay, right. There is no further questions on this part of the report. Is that agreed? Thank you. So it's
sorry, Barry.
Sorry, Veronica.
We'll move to 4D, External Auditor's Annual Audit Report.
Okay.
Trustees of Dundee City Council Trust Funds.
Rachel, I think this part again is part of your report.
Thanks, convener. And yes, my senior audit manager, Fiona Owens, is the appointed auditor for the registered charities that fall within Section 106 of the Local Government Act 1973, which requires a full audit by a public sector auditor, where the council are the sole trustees of a registered, an OSCR registered charity. Fiona's unfortunately on holiday, which dates to prior to her being appointed as your auditor. So she will sign these accounts on Monday. So if you, on behalf of the trustees, approve these accounts today, the accounts will get signed by the auditor on the 29th of September. So still within the September timescale. So similar to the council, we've got a cover letter that summarises that the audit of the annual accounts is substantially complete, and unqualified clean audit opinions are proposed for each of the charitable trust funds. And there's a separate annual audit report appended to this. We've previously combined that with the council's annual audit report. There was a decision by Audit Scotland to split those out into separate reports so that it was clearer for trust fund trustees what their responsibilities were, what the audit responsibilities were, and what the results of those audits were, which is why you have a separate report to you today. So again, clean audit opinion with the detail of the audit opinion provided as an appendix to the cover letter, and again the detail of the representations requested from management are in Appendix B to that. There's nothing non-standard in there, but just to share that detail with you. There was one adjustment to the trust fund accounts for legal fees that were not known at the time of preparing the accounts. That figure was then provided during the course of the audit. So the audited accounts have been amended by that. Similarly, I will ask if there are any matters related to fraud, actual or suspected, or any non-compliance with laws and regulations in relation to the trust funds that Fiona Owens needs to be made aware of before she signs. I will pause and hopefully.
That was the open question of the Hill Committee, so it doesn't appear to be. Okay. It's none.
Thank you very much. That's reassuring. Thank you very much. So the cover letter gives those two appendices for your information. The separate annual audit report on the charitable trust funds runs along a similar structure to the council in that it sets out that the key messages at the front. It confirms Fiona's and the team's independence from the trust funds as the external auditor and sets out the scope of the audit of those annual accounts. We note the materiality levels. Similarly, the annual audit plan set out the materiality based on last year's values, and on the receipt of this year's financial statements, we have revised those materiality levels for judging the significance of any misstatements we find. Exhibit 3 sets out under significant findings in key audit matters the one change that was made to the Fleming Trust accounts, and sets out the audit adjustment impact at Exhibit 4. And again, there was the significant risk of material misstatement identified in the annual audit plan for the trusts, which was management override of controls. As you'll have seen in the council accounts and previously in the trust accounts, that's a risk for any audit. That's a standard presumed risk that all auditors are required by auditing standards to take into account. It's not a specific comment on the trust fund's system of internal controls. You'll see that in every single audit plan that is presented to you. So that confirms that the outcome of the audit was there was no evidence of fraud caused by management override of controls. So that's quite a short annual audit report to say clean opinion will be provided on the trust funds, that there were no substantive matters to do with the qualitative aspects about estimates, about the quality of the accounts or the working papers, and there's no actions to be taken in response to the audit of the trust funds. So that's provided to you as a scrutiny committee on behalf of the trustees of each of these trusts. They've delegated that responsibility to the scrutiny committee to approve the accounts. So I was going to pause there, and I'd like to thank officers for all the support they've given to us, both on the trust funds audit and on the Dundee City Council audit. I think we have good, positive, constructive relationships with finance staff while maintaining independence, and I think the clean audit opinions that you're seeing today are a reflection of the efforts that have gone in by officers to preparing those accounts and indeed in supporting the audit process. So I was going to pause there, and Mark and myself will take any questions on the trust fund accounts that members might have. Thank you.
So any questions for Audit Scotland on these accounts?
Yeah, I had one, but it's actually not in accounts. It's on the process. I don't know if it's appropriate to bring it up at this time.
Okay,
Yeah,
go for it. Yeah.
yeah. Well, on page 265, and it's the second paragraph, it's about the hospital fund and about the expenditure. Obviously, this current year so far, there's been only 22 grants at £80. That's for 24-25, and it only amounts to £1,760. I'm just curious about when the last time that payment went up, because I think I remember when councillors dealt with it and allocated that it was actually about the same amount. So maybe we should be looking to increase that to people if there's a need. And I'm curious about, now that it's gone to the welfare benefits people, which I take it that's what's happened, do people still have to apply for the grant? Who decides? And I'm well aware of the good job that the welfare benefits department does. They're absolutely fabulous, and have probably brought millions of pensioners loads of money. So I'm just that there's a lot of questions I would like to ask, and it's probably some involvement in the sort of aims and objectives and how that's progressing. So it's a sort of historical thing. It might be better to ask officers off camera. If anybody can apply.
We'll maybe get you some level answer.
Right.
But we'll start with, if there's no questions for Rachel, can this report D be approved? That would be approved then, okay. So then we're 4E. I think, Paul, that's just your response, is it?
It is indeed. So nothing specific to add, Bailey Keenan.
Yeah. Is there any questions for Paul? None. Okay, so I think that really takes you up to where you are, Helen, and perhaps those officers can give you some comment. And I know that these charitable funds get split and distributed in a different way that normally comes back to a committee via reporting. Maybe officers can give a bit more detail to Bailey Wright on that. And the potential for should that hospital fund go up.
So Bailey Wright, first of all, thanks very much for the question. If I can I take that one away and have a look at the absolute process, because I'm not absolutely sure of that, indeed of the history of the value of the payments and when it was last set, and also how we would go about changing that value. So I'm happy to take that away and come back with a more kind of detailed response outlining all the questions that you've raised.
Yeah, I'm happy with that because when I look at the page before 263, the hospital fund issued under the Dundee Churches and Hospital Act 1864, I think it's on behalf of the poor of the town. And I look at what we're actually spending out of that fund. And as I said, welfare benefits do a fantastic job, but they are allocated 30,000 and we're only distributing £1,760 this year. So I just feel that, you know, maybe we need to do a bit more.
Yeah, Paul's going to come back and give I'll be on the Scrutiny Committee an update on that. Is that we're just on to questions on this report then. Is there any more questions on 4F? Would appear not. Is that Councillor Black?
Yes, I've got a question for Paul. Should we be concerned that the expenditure in the Fleming Trust, for example, is about, I think, 300,000 a year, but it's sitting on nearly £9 million. And equally in Belmont, there's £2 million and expenditure's only about, if I remember rightly, about 16,000. Is that a problem, or actually do we need to maintain those reserves in case of disrepair or something like that?
So the reserves would require to be withheld if there were any additional expenditure that came up as a one-off that couldn't be funded from the rents that the properties generate. That there are any significant investment into the housing stock in the past, we've utilised the reserves that have accumulated to contribute towards them in addition to any borrowing. So I wouldn't say there's any significant concern at this point, and I'm not aware that the auditor has drawn any concerns from their review of the account either, Councillor Black.
Sure, and for the Belmont Trust, is that any different? Again, there's £2 million there, but really quite a low annual expenditure. I know that there's a great big building there just waiting to fall down.
Yeah. So as I understand it, there's very limited transactions that go through the Belmont Fund, and the key items there are any assets held by the fund, i.e. the investments and the property. But again, I'm not aware of any specific risks or concerns at this moment, and likewise, I don't think the auditor has raised any either.
Okay, thank you. Thanks very much for that.
I'm sure the Belmont estate's still up for sale, Jimmy. So there might be something you've missed while you were off council, but it's probably taken a long time to dispose of. So, Lord Provost Charity, is there any questions on that? No. I think we've skipped through all three charities then, so can these three reports be agreed? Okay. Right then, Veronica, we'll skip on again then.
Thank you, Bailey Keenan. Item 5, Internal Audit Plan Update and Progress Report.
So Bailey Keenan, happy to speak to report 250 in Cathy's absence today, who unfortunately can't join us. So just to confirm, this report is for noting, and apologies because I'm actually working blind just now. All my IT has gone down, but it notes progress in terms of implementing the plan, and it also notes that the planned review of employability has been postponed into next year's audit plan, reflecting the recent review within that area, and provides an update in terms of progress of implementing any agreed actions. So happy to take any questions that members may have.
Okay, Billy McPherson.
Thanks, and Paul, I appreciate you've no IT in front of you at the moment, so I'm happy that this response comes by email thereafter. I was particularly interested in the ICT review of service cyber incident readiness, and my interest is simply because we're aware of so many large organisations that have been subject to cyber attacks recently, and obviously I think we would all want assurance that our systems are as robust as they possibly can be. I was just really wondering for more, looking for more information about who's actually undertaking this particular review in the plan. I understand from the report it's a contractor, but I'm assuming it's someone has speciality with, a specialism rather within the area of cyber security. And as I say, quite happy that you come back to me offline, if you like, with regard to a substantive response on that.
It looks like David's going to come in with a response.
Yeah. Hi, thank you, Bailey McPherson. Yeah, just obviously with Paul not seeing anything in front of him at the moment, I can try and come in on this one. So the audit will be carried out by AZs, our contract partners. So they're the ones that carry out our IT audits for us as part of our audit plan. And they do have a specialist IT team that will carry that work out. So they have started that work at the moment. As obviously it says at the moment, it is in progress. And they will carry that work out.
Right, that's helpful, David. I understand it's they have to complete by the end of the calendar year. When do you envisage this coming back to Scrutiny Committee? Because I think it's an area that we'll have a particular interest in, given, as I say, the issues that have affected so many other large organisations.
So again, as we sort of say on that against that particular audit, we are looking to bring that to the December 25 committee.
Okay.
So that will be to the next committee.
Right. I thought that meant they finished, but clearly it'll come to the next committee. That's really helpful. Thanks indeed, David.
Okay, Councillor Black. Have we got you on mute, Jimmy?
Oh, sorry, Mike. Being very eloquent there and nobody was hearing me. That's not so good. Yeah, the report has got absolutely loads of good stories in it. There's a lot of very positive things. There's two I'd like to highlight. One is the Scottish Government's got a policy of community wealth building, which is a bit of an obscure term. It's a bit like Fraser's saying management speak, but actually it is turning into something positive, because what it's doing is driving our ability to place more contracts locally, and the percentage of our procurement spent with Dundee-based organisations has increased by 20%. I think that's extremely useful and extremely positive for local employers, local businesses, local people. So community wealth building is a really good thing, and of course community benefits and big contracts can be used in the same way. The other thing I'd like to highlight is child poverty and poverty in general. I mean, taking an example, reducing the cost of the school day, we've been working away at that. We're seeing the uptake of free school meal entitlement going up 6% in the previous year. But even at the extent of simply direct aid to the various food initiatives in the city, where we've yet again committed £500,000 to the broader cost of living support, I think that's pretty positive. And although we have not solved poverty, and probably we will never solve poverty, we are making a big contribution. So I want to congratulate the staff who've been involved in delivering those policies, because it is actually beginning to work.
Okay, thanks for that, Jimmy. Any other questions on report 5? Okay then, Veronica, move on to 6. That's report agreed.
Thank you. Item 6, internal audit reports.
Oh, you skipping through these as well?
Yeah, you're happy to do so, convener. So this report again is for noting. This is the internal audit reports that have been undertaken since the previous Scrutiny Committee. There's 4 internal audits that you will see within paragraph 4.3 of the report. 2 of those have received a substantial assurance and another comprehensive assurance, with the remaining report on capital and planning receiving a limited assurance audit. As I mentioned before, Cathy's unable to join us today, but I'm happy, along with David, to take any questions that you may have in relation to these audits, and any areas that we can't, or indeed other officers that are on the call, we will revert after committee to members.
Okay, Billy McPherson.
Yeah, I'd be interested in more information about the limited assurance in relation to effective monitoring and scrutiny processes with progress on capital projects, which is a focus on HRA capital plan. And I was just really wondering if we could have a bit more information on that, but also should we not have a similar process in relation to the non-HRA, in other words, the general fund capital plan as well?
Yeah, thanks, Billy McPherson. So happy to again provide that assurance. So specifically, this area was identified as a risk to be included within the internal audit plan, as there had been a number of staffing changes involved in that process area. In addition to that, it was evident through the regular reports that are coming to committees that there has been, there was a level of volatility within the projections, shall we say. So it was agreed to undertake a review of the entire process, and it was officers that indeed requested that. So as part of that, it has highlighted a number of recommendations. One of those is to look at the arrangements in terms of the detail that sits behind the projections that come to members on a monthly basis, and that's precisely, as I understand it, where the audit recommendation is coming at. So looking at the detail that supports the information that's included within the report, and officers have taken away those recommendations and are reflecting on them, and will make any appropriate changes following the audit. In terms of your comment on the general fund, there are and have been different reviews of the general fund process in terms of both the budget setting process and the monitoring therein, and in the past, and we'll continue to keep that under review moving forward.
Okay, I'm happy with that. Thank you.
The question I was going to ask was on the same subject, so no other questions. Is this report agreed? Thank you. Okay, Veronica.
Thank you, Billy Keenan. We now move to item 7, National Fraud Initiative.
Again, Paul, you want to make a comment?
Yeah, thank you, Billy Keenan. So again, this report is for noting. The report notes the progress in terms of undertaking the 24-25 NFI, which is a data matching exercise. It also includes the Audit Scotland's NFI self-appraisal in terms of NFI. It's pleasing to note in terms of that self-assessment that there are no direct actions by way of improvements to take in relation to the process, but happy to take any questions on the content within the report.
Are there any questions on this report? Is the report agreed then? Thank you. Sorry?
Convener, I do have a question on that.
Okay, sorry.
Something I flagged up to Paul Thompson in advance, which was, it's a report about fraud, but it also talks about errors. And I wonder, are we able to identify what is fraud and what is error within the report?
Thanks again, Councillor Back, for the question. So the process undertakes that evaluation in terms of data match and identifies any anomalies that are there. Where an area where that there is differences highlighted, and it would deem that the cause of that differences, you like, beyond reasonable doubt has arisen as a result of a fraudulent act that would perhaps require to be considered in terms of a criminal investigation, then we would consider that to be fraud. Otherwise, if it's not, and it perhaps the disclosure of any data could have perhaps just been as a result of an individual's error or misunderstanding, then that would fall into the category of error. So it would be, fraud would be considered again where it was established that beyond any reasonable doubt that the information that provided it had done so on purpose.
I think my concern is if you present the total figure, then it makes people of Dundee sound worse than we actually are, which is why I think it would be helpful to know what's fraud and what's error. But anyway, that's something we can maybe discuss later. Thank you.
So certainly happy to pick that up, Councillor Black, just to confirm within the overall total there isn't any amounts there that are considered to have occurred as a result of fraud. But we can review the format of the information moving forward and include it on the way that you've suggested.
Thank you very much.
No further questions on this report?
Yeah.
So, oh, David,
sorry, I'm just going to come in just to say that the table on page 97 does just refer to the errors, so there isn't actually any fraud cases that have been identified from the NFI results so far this year.
Okay, thank you for that, David. Is this report agreed that? Okay, we'll move on then, Veronica.
Item number 8, corporate fraud team activity and performance, including whistleblowing 2024-25.
Yeah. Want to make a comment, Paul, or will we just go to questions?
Happy to make a brief comment if you wish, Billy Keenan. So just to say that this report again is for noting reflects a summary of the work undertaken by the corporate fraud team over the past year and identifies any savings that are arising through the investigation that have been undertaken. It also summarises the number of whistleblowing complaints or reports that have been received by the council in the past year, of which there were 31, and gives an update in terms of the status of those. I can confirm based on last year, that's an increase of 10 reports. So we had 21 reports in the previous year, but again, happy to take any questions in terms of the content of the report.
Can I maybe ask that, because it obviously mentions that there's fraud in relation to business grants, or and I'm just wondering, if of course it's similar to Councillor Black, there's fraud and error. So if we can identify that a business has created a fraud against council, would they remain on the trusted traders list, given that we potentially put them out there with a sort of gold star blessing to deal with the most vulnerable in our city? So, or can we review that in some way to try to ensure that, if they would try to take us to the cleaners, we wouldn't have put them out there to potentially rip the vulnerable off?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely reasonable. I think it's important to recognise that some of the businesses that will request for these grants may not be on that scheme. However, the team are involved in a number of checks in terms of undertaking due diligence alongside colleagues in city development in terms of any grant claims that we do receive. And whether if we do identify any anomalies as part of that process that are deemed to be of a fraudulent nature, then they would be reported and dealt with accordingly. And if the outcome of those investigations were that those companies were undertaking these or applying for these grants dishonestly, then they would absolutely not be the type of organisation that the council would be looked to refer people to within a trusted trader scheme.
Yeah. Thanks for that reassurance. Is there any further questions on this report? Can that be agreed? Final item then, Veronica.
Thank you. Item number 9, Council Plan 2022 to 2027, Progress Report for 2024-25.
Yeah. I think we've obviously seen the plan along at City Governance Committee. Has anyone got any other questions that would wish to ask? That would appear not then. So is this report agreed?
Convener, me, please.
Sorry, who's that? Lee.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, sorry, they didn't see it in the chat until
No,
now.
that's all right. It's just to welcome the amazing work in regards to the income maximisation, but I know on page 142 that there's a welfare officer pilot in the Morgan cluster expanded to the Baldrag and Braveview and Craigie schools. So I am assuming that the Braveview and Craigie has been moved to the new school, Greenfields, and I just wondered when the pilot ends and if there's plans to expand this pilot upon completion.
Okay, please let someone coming in. Anthony, is it?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Mills. I suppose I can give you a partial answer to that in that as the Drumgeeth campus came together, the welfare rights team, where the pilot is from, and Audrey May and her team have been working closely together to make sure, firstly, we get the right location in the campus for the person to work, but secondly, to work out what that arrangement looks like moving forwards. So the answer is I don't have an answer for you just now, but the teams are working together to solve that for the future, and it is something that we're looking to put in, and it's not going to go away.
Thanks, Anthony. Appreciate that.
Lee, you're aware that obviously the welfare rights team do a lot of outreach work, including doctor surgeries and the like. So, you know, they're spread pretty well over the city, but no doubt in schools is another area where people that work with people working with most vulnerable and will notice parents that are kind of struggling by. So, if we can work with them as well, it'd be marvellous. Okay, is this report agreed? Okay, thank you very much for your time. I'm sure you appreciate me keeping you for as long as I did. Good, and have a nice day. Bye.
Yes, thank you.
See you later.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
It's a pleasure.
Thanks, convener. Thank you.
Bye.